Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. It is good to be back, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the multi-voice reviewer. I have many voices, but one opinion. And welcome to of course, the name of my channel is Multi-Voice Entertainment. But it's been so long since I ever finally got myself to review something. And, I know I've been through a lot of hiatus lately, just because I needed a break for something. And right now, there's something I want to talk about to you folks. I love Dynamite Entertainment. Now, I know some of you are not too familiar with Dynamite Entertainment, but now, Dynamite Entertainment is a comic book company, and it's been around ever since, I would say probably 2016, 2017, I would say. But one thing, it was kind of surprising to me. The reason, I know that I was a DC fan more than a Marvel fan, but now I'm becoming a fan of Dynamite Entertainment. Why? It's because Dynamite Entertainment done something that I just couldn't believe they did, and I became a fan to it for here on out. They have taken superheroes that are long forgotten. That's right. Dynamite Entertainment own the rights of all the superheroes that are now public domain and pretty much, I mean, really forgotten superheroes that not many people even know in the past, and even ones that came from Pulp Fiction magazines and even comic strips. You know, those comics that you see in newspapers. And Dynamite Entertainment, they've been gathering all the old superheroes. They did this issue, which I like to have, Project Superpower series. But of course, one thing I do have is I have the first issue of this one that I got in my hand, Masks. This one it has the Shadow, the Spider, the Green Hornet, Kato, and the silhouette looks like it's a black bat, and of course, Zorro. Now, I know the Zorros came from the Western days, but this Zorro is a next descendant in the 40s. So this comic book is made in the 40s, but they even brought a modern. But the reason why I talk about my Dynamite Entertainment is because they have done a comic book series, which I have in my hand. They have did Buck Rogers, Volume 1 and Volume 2. So, I wanted to know how Dynamite Entertainment did for Buck Rogers, so I asked my mom to get these for me, and so let's dig into the graphic novel of Buck Rogers, Volume 1 and 2, and let's see how it all happened. Let's see how this whole thing goes. One thing I gotta say about the cover is I love the look of Buck Rogers. It looks futuristic. It's unlike anything you can ever even think of for the future. And that's what I gotta say about the cover. There are different types of covers in there, but I just want to go to the basic. Now, it shows here that Buck Rogers is flying his rocket ship into space, and all of a sudden he went to a galaxy drive because there's a button that's called Galaxy Drive. Little does he know that he ended up into the future in the 24th century. Now, he was having some altitude that he was trying to contact his friend named Greg, but sadly he crash landed in the forest. Meanwhile, while he was trying to get himself out of that wreckage, went back into the past. You see, he was up in the space for a while, seeing the meteorites, until he decided to land back to Earth. Now, this takes place in the past, in the 21st century. He didn't hit the gravity drive yet, but a couple of jets spotted him, telling him to pull over, but he always kept running away from them. And after he lands, a bunch of military guys arm their guns at him, and he says, "Come on, guys, you know me, Anthony Buck Rogers. Eddie, soldiers." But they tackled him, and he started fighting them until his girlfriend Ashley showed up and told him to stop until he gets knocked out by the butt of the gun. Gosh, this guy's so cocky. Back into the future, he woke up in the wreckage, and some lady in the futuristic outfit, the same as Buck Rogers, looked at the name tag and discovered that his name was Rogers, and she decided to get him out of the cave that he crashed on. And her name is Wilma Deering, and this is her in the issue you see here. In the issue you see here. Somebody needs to turn down those boombox. But anyway, all of a sudden there was somebody kept firing at them while Buck got his satchel because he has something that's very important. And then when they come across a bear in a futuristic armor and a laser on his hand.
Only you can prevent forest fires, or I'll fire you.
Yeah, it makes me think of Smokey the Bear. This is what happens if Smokey the Bear kept trying to force people to stop starting forest fires. Buck Rogers fired his gun, which is a 21st century pistol, so got him right in the shoulder, no effect, and the bear shot his laser at Buck and Wilma. And it turns out that it wasn't exactly a deadly laser, it was a teleporter gun. So they teleported into a ship where these big muscle guys, bald muscle guys, carried them into their cell. It turns out that Wilma was out of her uniform because her uniform doesn't work when they're in their prison. So all she's wearing is her undershirt and her undergarment. Well, I mean, it's just going to show. This is what Wilma's wearing here. Anyway, the two big guys showed up, hooked their necks to their. I mean, it's like one of those things like what a dog catcher do when they catch a dog, and they always say,
No fight, no speak.
but they went all the way to see their leader, and it's none other than Killer Kane, and Princess Ardala. And of course, Buck Roger looked at her and sees her as some sort of angel for a princess, but Kane slapped him, and the big guys knocked him out. And he was shocked to see that he's in space. Back in the present time, Buck Roger got an ice pack on his head from that gun that he got butted in, and his ex-girlfriend Ashley told him that there is a civilization on Mars, but it turns out most of the people in that civilization are dying because of some plague happening there. But Buck doesn't take this whole thing serious, so he doesn't want to get involved with that situation. Anyway, Buck Roger wants to go for another space drive one more time. Now, Ashley walked up to Buck and told him that he shouldn't go because the general had orders for him to stay, but he has to go. And one thing that Buck Rogers did not know that Ashley was trying to tell him, she's pregnant. And of course, her last name is Deering, so her full name is Ashley Deering. Anyway, Buck Roger went up into space. The general was pissed, and they told him not to hit the gravity drive, not galaxy drive, gravity drive, and boom, got him into high speed, and then they lost signal from him. They couldn't find him anywhere. So, unlike the TV series where he was in space and some meteor shower got to him, causing him into a cryo sleep, and unlike the graphic novel which that Buck Roger came from, Oh yeah, look up the Pulp Fiction magazine of Buck Rogers because it was called Armageddon 2419. And on the story, he was in a cave, and the gas fumes from the cave sustained his body, so he was in like some sort of sleep until he woke up in the future out of the cave. But now in this one, he pressed the gravity drive, and boom, it took him into the 25th century. And now everybody think that Buck Rogers is dead. Meanwhile, Buck Rogers woke up into that future, and now here's something really gory, kind of gory in this issue that which I cannot show you, but it turns out that these people are killing Earth people by cutting off their heads and their hands and their feet and skinning the rest of their body. I don't know why, but why it has to be that gory, but I mean, it's rated T for teen, according to this comic. But anyway, they're about ready to behead Wilma, but Buck Roger knocked out one of the guys, kicked him in the groin, even though the big guy tried to say, "No, fight!" And then he kicked him in the groin. And the other guy starts going after him until Wilma stabbed him in the back with one of their cutlery. So they're about ready to make an escape. They went through the ventilation duct, and it turns out that most of the meat that they're getting from their captive, they're feeding it to their giant worms that they had in their ship. So they went to the waste center and found an old-fashioned space clothes. And there you see. Now these are a flash from the past right there because these are the actual suits that they used back then in the comic strips, and I'm surprised that they start using them in this issue. This is Buck Rogers and Wilma Deering wearing the old-fashioned clothing that they used to wear back in the old days. Meanwhile, in the 21st century, there was a satellite and a group of people inside their satellite. I mean, it was like a space shuttle or something, space system or something. Turns out one of the scientists went all the way to one of the side of their satellite, and he himself hit the gravity drive, and now they got no signal from him. Trying to prove to people that Buck Roger isn't dead, but the general is stubborn and wants to clarify that Buck Roger is dead because they're his funeral. And the general told Ashley to continue on with the funeral. And anyway, on the funeral, Ashley walked up to Buck Rogers' mother and father, and they were looking at the coffin they have there. The father decided to open the coffin, but it turns out there was no body, but some memorabilia about Buck Rogers. He had a fish bowl, orange turtleneck sweater, a yellow undershirt, biker gloves, and an orange pair of pants. He was pretending to be a spaceman, and that's what he always wanted in his life. Meanwhile, in the 25th century, Buck Rogers and Wilma, they decided to figure out a way to fly around and trying to control their rockets on their back, their jetpacks. And he was trying to get the hang of it until Wilma grabbed him, and it looked like he was about ready to kiss her, but it turns out she yelled out, "Are you through fooling around?" But they decided to get back in the ship because they need one of their pods. While at the same time, Killer Kane and Princess Ordell are planning to attack Earth. And they also decided to send one of their animal troops to go after Buck and Wilma, so they found a gray wolf named Lopin. Meanwhile, at Earth, the the cyber Smoky Bear, I would call him, he was looking at the old-fashioned pistol until some of the Earth troops showed up. He was about ready to shoot their lasers at them, but one troop went too close to him, and the bear says, "Fresh meat!" And then he attacked him, killing him, while two of the other troops shot him and he was gone. But what they got is the old-fashioned pistol and the device that Buck Roger had in his satchel. Meanwhile, a white tiger was about ready to get on his pod until Wilma knocked the white tiger out, while Buck Roger is tackling against the big dude. And they took the pod and landed right on Mars. And Buck Roger figured out that Mars still have oxygen, and he went to the greenhouse on Mars. I mean, there was a lot of skeletons collecting moss and dust. But at the same time, Professor Hewer got the device, and there is Buddy, which it turns out Buddy is Wilma's little brother. And Buddy told Hewer that the guy that Wilma found, his name was Buck Rogers, and Professor Hewer knew who Buck Roger was. Meanwhile, on Mars, the Gray Wolf saw the helmet and discovered that Mars has air, so now he's on a hunt after Buck and Wilma. Meanwhile, Wilma is wondering what happened to all these people on Mars, and Buck says it was all because of the plague. And she was like, "The plague?" And he was like, "Relax, it's tame now, it's gone." And he found himself a couple of tranquilizers. Meanwhile, at Professor Hewer, he went to a warehouse and found a giant crate, and he found a magazine where it says Buck Rogers, saying that he was dead. Oh, and here's a little something there. If you look over here, there is the head of Twiggy the robot from the 70s Buck Rogers series, the one I like. Trying to get it right. Here we go. There's Twiggy. Anyway, Killer Kane and Princess Ardell are sending their troops in their pod ready to attack Earth, while the Grey Wolf is hunting after Buck and Wilma. And of course, Buck found an apple tree and get himself an apple. And after he was telling her that he must have time traveled because he was from the 21st century, Wilma didn't believe him, so she punched him in the face and slapped him, saying, "You take me as a fool? Time travel?" I mean, she doesn't. Do I look like an idiot? I mean, she doesn't believe him at all. Until he knew that the White Wolf was about ready to attack Wilma, so Buck says, "Bad dog," and he fired his tranquilizer at the wolf, and he fought a couple of rounds on him, but I guess the tranquilizer darts are dud because they're not taking him down yet. So the wolf grabbed his laser and started firing at them. Meanwhile, their admiral named Admiral Dickinson, he discovered that Professor Hewer is testing the device. It has the gravity drive on it, so it makes their ship go faster than the speed of light. But it won't take them into the further future, so don't worry. So anyway, the Grey Wolf starts sniffing for Buck and Wilma, while at the same time, Killer Kane and Princess Ardell's ship, they went to this area pod where it's full of their animals, little baby animals, birthing pods, which kind of reminds me so much of The Matrix. You know, where Keanu Reeves woke up in the real world. Anyway, Buck Rogers fighting against that Grey Wolf. And when the Grey Wolf was about ready to do a final attack on Buck, he didn't know that Buck Rogers was standing next to a cliff. So, and Admiral, I mean, all the records pointed out that he is from the past, and he told Wilma that everything he says is true, even though Wilma doesn't trust him, doesn't believe him. But it's pretty obvious. What Buck Rogers was saying is true. So Buck Roger got himself all suited up, and he says, "How do I look?" And this is what he looks now. I wonder how much it would cost me to get myself a costume like that, so I would look more like him. Anyway, in the 21st century, Greg showed up in the bar, and he saw Ashley, and he discovered that Ashley was drinking sparkling water because, well, it's obvious Ashley was pregnant. And now there is this huge battle going on between Killer Kane's ship and Killer Kane's ship and also Admiral Dickens' ship. There's a huge battle, as you see from here. While the animal troops are battling against the Admiral's troops. Pretty interesting. Well, at the same time, Kane and Ardell are planning to escape, but it turns out that they released their they got one of their tubes. It makes the troops go all the way to their ship. So they decided to hide. So Ardell decided to rip up her dress to make her look like a hostage. And while Buck was the first one who landed into their ship, the rest of the troops followed. And Buck went off on his own while Wilma and the rest of the troops trying to find a hostage. And there was a whole fight going on. And Kane, he found one of the dead troops and he took one of their uniforms. Until all of a sudden Buck Roger found Princess Ardell, and she was like, "Please, please, I'm a hostage." And of course, this big robot showed up and started fighting against Buck, while Wilma found the hostage and got him out of their prison. And of course, when Buck Roger was battling against that one robot, turns out it wasn't a robot. It was a cybernetic armor controlled by a small mouse who can talk. So Buck grabs a mouse, but the mouse bit him in the hand. But at the same time, Buck grabs the princess and tried to make his escape, but all the animals were yelling, "Mercy! Mercy!" So the next scene it showed, the animal wanted to know how's the cargo hold doing, and Wilma got all the hostages, but they also got a little something extra. Buck grabbed the princess and some of the big beefy guys and the talking animals, and Buck says, "I can explain." Now this is volume 1 here. Let's dig into volume 2. From Earth to the Moon. Shall we? Anyway, Buck Roger ended up on Earth. Turns out that Buck Roger got arrested for insubordination and treason. But he did tell him that he is from the past, and he woke up into the future, and he's not a traitor. So they try to look for all of his possessions and the device. And it turns out that he did help the troops. He did spare some of the prisoners, and even did his part. And of course, Professor Hewer starts defending Buck by showing everybody the pictures and everything that proves that he is a man from the past. So they call him the hero from the past. While at the same time, the talking animals and the big guy are in prison. So anyway, now there's like tons of fans are now getting all like 3 cheers to Buck Rogers, woo! And they're kind of looking at him like a hero, an icon, until Buddy showed up with their hover car, and he picked up Buck and Professor Hewer. Now they asked him, does he know how to drive? But he wasn't paying attention to his driving. So Buck grabbed the wheel and told Buddy to sit in the back. But of course, Hewer says, "You know how to drive this device?" And he's from the past, so no. So Hewer took over the wheel. Took him to Washington, D.C., and all these giant. And it turns out that in Washington, D.C., it's a swamp area now. I mean, there's a statue of Abe Lincoln, and now they're being attacked by giant worms with teeth, like swamp worms. So they decided to camp for the night and turned on their shielding reflector, the zapping reflector, and it turns out that it zapped one of the insects, a mosquito about the size of a football. So the future's going to be really deadly. Anyway, Buck Rogers, who kept thinking that there might be a resemblance between Ashley and Wilma, while Hewer starts explaining about how everything goes and how the future was, until they decided to went to an underground cave, and out comes the lava. So Buck Rogers and Buddy turn on their shield and hugged Hewer while the lava started caving them in. While at the same time, Wilma, who doesn't trust Buck and told Buddy not to trust him, she went into a city in the sky owned by a guy who goes by the name of Han. Well, at the same time, the talking animal are now, I mean, they're still prisoners, and all they're doing is gardening the area so they can have vegetables to eat, fruit, fruit and vegetables. They got out of the lava until they come across a bunch of cave dwellers, which are normal, average human being who starts living in underground caves. Now, what they look like us, except their skin is so pale and their eyes are red. The reason why they're like that is because, well, I'll get to that later. While at the same time, Princess Ordell was getting terrified from a mouse that started to attack her until Kane showed up disguised as one of the troops and tried to make their narrow escape. So they finally escaped. Now, these cave dwellers, they don't want to use any guns or lasers, so they tossed away the 21st century pistol, but when they tried to destroy the phaser, it exploded like a bomb, like a grenade. But they also have nuclear missiles, and how their future become that way is because a long time ago, one of their satellites was hit by one of their nuclear missiles hit their satellite. So now they were getting no Wi-Fi connection, no signal, nothing. I mean, they were completely cut off. So they think they were under attack, and they had like a blackout going on. So they decided to put on their nuclear suits and went underground. And they've been going underground for decades until but there was a problem. When they decided to go outside, one just opened the door. Turns out they're very sensitive to the light. Sun burns them and blinds them, so they don't go outside anymore. So they've been digging underground like ants. While at the same time, Han, on the other hand, he has a giant magnifying glass, and he can use it to reflect the sun and burn any crops or anything in the world. And Wilma is trying to make peace with him. And since these cave dwellers are getting very aggressive, Buck Rogers, he turned on the light of his suit and blinded them. And then they finally made their escape. And of course, there was a file that had Buck Roger in it, and there was a picture of him and Ashley, but he had to let go of the picture. But anyway, they got themselves out of the cave, while at the same time, the lava from their underground cave where they live, it got covered, and it pretty much burned whoever left, whoever lived in there are now dead. While at the same time, in the in the present, there is a baby that Wilma gave birth to. While in the future, Wilma dressed up as one of their ladies and she slugged Han, but he got the blood out of his mouth and rubbed it on her face. Now, since they have no authorities and they cannot go into that floating city where Han lives, so So, pretty much, Buck Rogers' suit, the power on his suit went out completely. Turns out that his suit doesn't work anymore because he ran out of energy from it. And he told the lady to take off her suit, but it turns out she's wearing nothing underneath. So he's like, okay, stop right there. But he needs to fly away to help Buddy because he knew he's going to be attacked on the floating palace. So Buck grabbed on the hovering bike, and when the laser was about ready to fire on Buddy, Buck showed up and saved his life. And the Admiral told Buck that they have no authority to go to that place at all. They have Wilma going undercover to trying to get some information from there, and they should not interfere. Well, at the same time, Wilma gets bathed by a bunch of bathing women, and she was like, back off, I don't want to be bathed. And Han was like, it's our custom. Any woman who I fancy should be bathed by the bathing women. So, they found Barnaby the pirate, who's more like an air sailor. Not exactly a pirate, but more like an air sailor. I mean, he has these flying ships, and they have cargo of shrimps and such. And they talk, and of course, now he has that Irish accent. Barnaby does, so Barnaby kept calling Buck Bucko, and he says it's Buck, just Buck. And then they start talking about just like their president of the United States, former action star Chuck Norris. So in the future, Chuck Norris is president. Imagine that. But anyway, Buck Roger got on top of their ship and he did the I'm the king of the world! Oh my gosh. Who forget Titanic? And of course, Professor Hewer has some batteries for his thermosuit in case he needs it. And now the Admiral and his troops showed up. Hewer and Buddy are in disguise, while Buck hid inside of a barrel full of shrimp. And they finally went to the city. Now, Barnaby knows Han, but Buck thought he was betraying them. So, Han took Buck into the arena, while at the same time he handcuffed Wilma Deering to be his new wife or something like that. I mean, does that remind you of Ming the Merciless? Anyway, took Buck in the arena and he revealed himself as Buck Rogers, but one of the guards grabbed his laser, showed it to Han. Turns out it can vaporize people and also destroys things in his way. So he decided to keep the laser while one of the gladiators showed up and start carrying his axe and about ready to kill Buck until he opened the ground. It turns out there's a cage with spikes in it. And of course, something happened. It made Wilma fell off the edge and he grabbed her, saved her life. But it turns out there's a bunch of asteroids coming over, and the asteroids are coming from the moon. So they need to get out of there. While in the present, Wilma's daughter is now flying the plane. I mean, not Wilma, but Ashley. Ashley's daughter starts flying the plane. While turns out that Greg is creating the device that it can create gravity drive. Anyway, the asteroids kept knocking down Han's castle and starts killing all the innocent people. So Barnaby turned on the laser net so everybody can be safe when they fall off. And of course, a bunch of the Admiral Dickens and his troops showed up to shoot some of the asteroids in order to save the castle and try to get some of the civilians out of the castle so they can be safe. But it turns out that these asteroids came from Mars. They're being fired by, I mean, not Mars, but from the moon. Turns out that the moon is inhabited by robots. and they just shoot asteroids out of the moon and land it on Earth. Now, Buck Rogers was trying to tell everybody to get on the ship, hurry up, if you value life, but they decided to stay and their place collapsed. Buck was really shocked and couldn't believe it. He tried to jump in to save him, but they hold him back. Even Wilma tried to hold him back. And therefore, that's when Wilma started noticing that he has a sensitive side. He's not as bad as she thought he was. Anyway, Princess Ardala and Kane, she decided to help them to go all the way to the moon and deal the threat. So they decided to form an alliance. While at the same time, Buck, Buddy, and Wilma, and of course Professor Hewer, look at the wreckage and see all the dead people who died and try to cover them for respect. Anyway, Buck Rogers saw Princess Ardala and Kane and he was pissed. But of course, fancy customs show kindness to a lady, so he has to kiss her hand. So they had to go to the planet Moon. And as they went to the planet Moon, out comes these robots. And he tried to hug Buck Rogers. On the present time, it turns out that Buck Rogers, in the present, he was packing all of his stuff, and Ashley got a snow globe. It has an astronaut in it. And it turns out that Buck Rogers was leaving Ashley. So he gave her a kiss, and she dropped the snow globe and left her house. So I guess things didn't go well between him and Ashley. Meanwhile, on the moon, all the robots showed up, and Buck Rogers fired his laser on one of the arms of the robots until they started repairing it. While at the same time, Kane and Wilma decided to look at the other area, see if there's any humans left on the moon. And it turns out that the entire planet of the moon is inhabited by robots because it turns out that there were some people who are drowned under the frozen waters, and even there are frozen stasis that they just turn off their life support and now they're all dead and frozen. So now all the robots started killing some of the humans, so they had to fire their guns away from them. While at the same time, Kane fired his laser at Wilma and only destroyed her suit, but it didn't kill her. And of course, Kane saw one of the rocket ship is getting it. I mean, a bunch of those robots kept taking parts out of it and saying, "Need it, need it, need it." While at the same time, Princess Ardell, she grabs she grabs a flag and trying to pin it on the moon, but Buck Rogers stopped her. So now Buck and Princess Ardell started fighting until another rocket ship showed up from the past, and an astronaut came out of that rocket ship and punched Buck Rogers in the face. And when that astronaut revealed herself, it's Ashley's daughter who looks remarkably like Wilma. So now Wilma disappeared all of a sudden and asking Buck what's happening to her. And Buck says, "Don't worry, Wilma, I can fix this." And that is the end of the Buck Rogers, the Dynamite Entertainment version. These comics are pretty good. Of course, there are some things that kind of boggle my mind, like is Ashley really related to Wilma or what? I mean, I don't know. But all in all, these are really good to read. I hope you guys can look them up, get them on Amazon or other comic stores, and enjoy them as well. And one thing I heard all of you enjoyed my audio drama of Flash Gordon meets Buck Rogers. And of course I'm working on a sequel becoming soon as I'm done with the script. It will be like this. And I also heard that George Clooney is making his own version of Buck Rogers. So I hope that George Clooney makes it good if he does succeed. And I don't know who's he going to cast. I mean, some people are saying that he's going to play Buck Rogers, but I think George Clooney is getting too old to be doing this. So I think he should find somebody else to play Buck Rogers and not him. Well, this is Multi-Voice Reviewer, and if any of you like this video, please leave a comment down below, hit like and subscribe for more, and I'm the Multi-Voice Reviewer. I remember it so I can jog your memory. Goodbye.